Josh, if you would do the roll call.
Rachel Arizmendi.
Present.
Ashley Bourne. Don Bransford. Don Cameron.
Here.
Nancy Cassidy. Helene Dillard.
Here.
Mike Gallo.
Here.
Crystal Haling.
Here.
Eric Holst. Jeff Huckabee. Bryce Lumberg. Martha Montoya. Joyce Sterling. Andy Thulin. Chris Valadez. Mr. President, we have a quorum.
Thank you, Josh. If you'll join me with the flag salute, please.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, we've got our minutes from the December 3rd meeting that we need approved. Do we have a motion to approve? Any further discussion or corrections? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So moved. All right, our first presentation this morning was supposed to be with Assembly Member Susan Eggman. Unfortunately, she could not join us this morning. I guess car got broken into, had an incident going on. So we're pleased to have Victor Frankovich, the Deputy Chief Consultant with the Assembly Committee on Ag. So if you'd join us, we'd love to have you here. Whatever you'd like is fine with us.
Spot over here near.
So welcome, Victor. You grab the podium there if you like.
So, Assemblymember Eggman again wanted to make her apologies for not being able to be here. I know she was going to talk a little bit about housing issues and homelessness as two of the key issues that were going to be coming up in the legislature today that don't necessarily affect ag. I do not have an expertise in that, so I'm just going to focus on some of the ag issues that we know about that are coming up. For the committee, one of the issues that we have is a lot of the big ag issues right now are things that don't come through our committee. So they're ancillary. We're involved in some of the issues, but we don't see them in our committee. One of the biggest issues we're going to see this year, or that we're going to be discussing a lot, is farm labor. The cost of it, the shortage of folks, and just trying to figure out how we're going to work with the wages, AB5, and a wide variety of other things. I believe that's going to take a lot of the time and oxygen out of the room for other issues that we would deal with normally. Other issue that's coming up is, of course, water. The Sustainable Groundwater Management Program, is underway, and people are starting to get their projects in. I understand the governor is working on allowing floodwaters to be used for groundwater recharge, and we'll be looking at those issues a bit, but again, not in our committee. One of the issues we've had that we've been discussing a lot also is just trade in general with USMCA, in the final stages. I think just supposed to hear it, they were saying they might hear it this Friday, or they'll push it back until after some other point in time. That will have a huge impact because they're two of our top 5 trading partners, and we need to get the stability and clarity of where we are at and what we can trade and how these programs will work. China, of course, another issue. Affecting ag, pistachios, and wine extensively, more so than a lot of other crops. And again, there's not a lot we can do at our level, but we have had discussions on that. We had an informational hearing on it just recently, just discussing what we could do and what the impacts are on ag. One of the issues that turned out to be on your guys' agenda today that I know that we will be looking at this year is food safety. We're looking at doing a joint informational hearing with the Senate Ag Committee. We're working out the details on it to be able to just kind of look at what's going on with the Leafy Green Marketing Agreement, which is an excellent program. I often use it as a model for other voluntary programs. What is it in the industry when we're discussing it? But as with the concerns that have been raised with the outbreaks last year. I think there was 2 from California and several from other places. I know you'll be touching that a little bit more today. We'll be looking at that and trying to figure out what sort of changes may need to be made or how the program can be improved. Other than that, some of the other issues that we're looking at, there was a report about the fairs and expositions. A fair from the auditor's office that pointed out a lot of issues. And there's been issues with a couple other local fairs, and so we're looking at either legislation. I know there's I think Salas has introduced a bill that will be looking at ethics training for fair staff and fair managers. I believe that's already in place, but he's first out of the gate. But we're also looking at trying to do an information or oversight hearing to find out what can be done better to deal with some of the issues that have popped up with the fairs, locally and throughout the state. Other issues that we'll probably see a lot of legislation on, just because we saw it last year, was food access. Assemblymember Mays had a bill, his second try at it, and I believe he will be doing a third try, trying to get a comprehensive food access bill through. It was bipartisan, and it got hung up in appropriations, where a lot of things do. One of the other issues that we had several bills on last year that I'm sure we will be seeing again are bills dealing with small and diverse farmers. Arambula's AB 417, Eggman's 838, and Revis's 986 all had different aspects of aiding or helping small and diverse farmers, which is one of the fastest growing segments of the farming population in California, through either interesting ways of doing land easements to be able to help land access for folks, training programs, or technical assistance. Or the Eggman bill looked to expand the small farmer advisors within UCA&R out to 10 over the 5 they had right now. But unfortunately, all those bills either died in appropriations or were vetoed by the governor. So we need to look at how we're going to address these issues. With the food access issue, I will bang on my favorite drum, which is the Farm to Fork program. The Farm to Fork program is an excellent program. It lacks significant funding. I see what the program does right now. This is me personally talking, not for the committee.
Victor,
Yeah.
did Nick pay you to come up and be his opening act today?
No, you've heard me go on about this all the time. So this is what is it? So I will be looking with our members on committee to see if see if people look to budget ask for it, because it's an excellent program, and I think with better funding it will be even better. So I'll open it for any questions, understanding that I'm not the assembly member, so some of the answers I will be, I don't know.
Yeah. So thank you, Victor. Thanks for being here. And we feel bad for the Assemblywoman. I can only imagine the paperwork and the reporting she's doing about now, having had a car of my own broken into. I had 2 things for your consideration that I would urge the committee to consider. And this is by how often I've been approached, and others in the administration, the real legitimate and deep concern about the potential of any fallowed acreage as a result of SGMA, that the land be not left bare, that we are smart and strategic in how that land might be repurposed, how we identify habitat conservation values or other types of activities, but most importantly, that it not be bare land, which creates its own public health. There's lots of committees that could do that. It's local land use, but we're also being asked for a lot of support on that. So I just think it's a topic that could be very timely. There's a lot of really good work going on with local groundwater management agencies in collaboration with some of the environmental organizations that actually sit on this state board. I think it's a timely topic, and I think it's a hugely important topic and worthy of consideration. And the other one you brought up, perhaps providing additional resources to UC Cooperative Extension for small farmer training. There's a huge structural deficit in the Cooperative Extension budget. And a couple of years ago, there was an opportunity that the Assembly Agriculture Committee used to just hear from UC Cooperative Extension about what their priorities are, what their funding situation is, and I would definitely encourage, it is needed as much now as it was 150 years ago when the whole system was created. So I think it's something that your committee could continue to do important informational hearings about. I'm not advocating anything.
Just suggesting.
Can I advocate then? On the cooperative extension issue, there are fewer positions now than there were 20 years ago.
Yes.
And 20 years ago, we weren't growing 400 plus crops in this state. And so what's happening within the system is those positions are getting repurposed. And a number of them, but probably not enough, are going to the small farms. But as a consequence, the larger commodities are losing those resources. And there's still many farmers out there that depend upon those resources. They're not big enough to hire their own consultants. And so cooperative extension is a very integral part of their operation. And so the cooperative extension and UCA&R has taken disproportionate cuts in the UC budget in times past. And part of the problem is it's housed within the office of the president. And so when the president got penalized, cooperative extension got penalized. So, we feel that, from a farmer's perspective, though, I mean, that's our resource. And that's to me, those people are the success of California agriculture. And it definitely needs to be bolstered. And and these people all come out of most of those cooperative extension individuals come from the state college programs or the university system, and so it just all dovetails, and it's led to safer food, regardless of some snafus that we've had.
Right.
But and the innovation that you see, and the new cropping that you see.
Well, yeah, I understand. And they make a great linkage between the farm and the UC. I've had several farmers say, yeah, it's easy for me to talk to my cooperative extension guy because he's not some egghead. Okay. You're right.
Chris, you got a question?
Yes. Victor, thank you. I would actually encourage the committee to consider aligning or integrating the chair's policy passions and priorities, particularly in the area of housing, and or align it or integrate it within the scope of the agriculture committee, particularly from the perspective of where housing or land use policies and or other regulatory factors are barriers or obstacles, particularly for employers. And I'll use my region, the Salinas Valley, which I believe is ground zero for not only a housing crisis for the farm worker community, but when you look at it from an availability and an affordability perspective, we are fortunate to have some employers who have developed their own farm worker housing projects for resident Californians, in addition to those who are complying with the H-2A requirements and are providing housing for visa holders or guest workers that are coming in from a foreign country. But I do think, and I know because of my work with the employer base in the Salinas Valley, there are more employers that I think are interested and would be willing to come to the table to put up their own capital to develop housing for farm workers, for Californians. But whether it's policies, and certain policies maybe at the county level, and or policies that are interconnected, and it may have to do with above ground wastewater carrying limitations and concerns at a regional water quality control type level, you start to see impediments, particularly as it relates to the willingness of the employer side to go forward and invest their dollars in what ultimately, as many have told me and as I see, is an opportunity to help retain and attract what is a tight workforce already, particularly in a region where, again, you know, the housing stock and the affordability of that housing stock is nearly unattainable for most farm workers in that region. So I would think from this perspective and what you've shared from the perspective of the chair, there is an intersection on housing and the work of the Act
There's
Committee.
an intersection. It's just hard to get that intersection to run through our committee.
We need to do some major engineering, don't we?
But yeah, what is it, Mr. Rivas and Anna Caballero, both of them members of the committee, have worked on those issues before. And so, yeah, we've seen them, but again, it doesn't get to run through our committee. We get to be adjacently helpful. So.
Yeah, do we have any other questions? Bryce, go ahead.
Thank you, Victor, for your report and for being here and for setting out the priorities. I think you're right on track on, I do think that the farm labor and water issues are critical and for the committee to stay on those is, I was thinking though, do you have any bills on rural broadband?
I
I'm
was
just
gonna say,
thinking
Took the words
that
right
it's
out of our mouths.
really
I was gonna say, what is it?
Exactly.
No, we haven't had any bills on rural broadband, but what is it again? When Caballero was chair, we did work on with her on some of the ag tech innovation stuff. What is it? And I was just having a long discussion in the back a little bit ago. What is it on rural broadband? It's an issue that we understand is important, needs to be done.
We're not communicating and connecting with the whole world if we don't have that in our rural communities.
And yeah, and we are definitely beyond the stage of studies. What is it? We know where we know the tough spots are. We know why there isn't broadband there, and we just need to figure out how to get the companies to go in. That's our problem that we're having. So,
Of course,
yeah,
I always will defer to Joyce Sterling on that issue.
Exactly.
Otherwise known as Ms. Broadband.
But yeah, I've got to agree wholeheartedly. This is a huge problem with us in rural communities. We have technology we want to implement that's going to save water, going to save all types of labor, and we can't implement because we don't have access. And somebody needs to stand up and take the lead on this because it's frustrating. It's totally frustrating to be left out. So I'll give
This
you
is
that charge.
California. This is California.
This is California. You know, you talk about, I mean, I talk to people two gigabytes. They're getting 2 gigabytes, 30 miles away, and we're lucky if we can get 2 megabytes.
yeah, what is it? Even the cost of the differential. We did
Exactly.
an info hearing. What is it? About 2-3 years ago with Annie Caballero, and Devin Mathis was there, and he was talking about how expensive his was. And I live in Lodi. He lives down in Tulare, and he paid double for crappy internet than what I pay for. And yeah, it doesn't make sense.
Oh, yeah, I was told I can get 30 megabits for $17,000 a year. So that was my latest proposal, which is better than the $750,000 that AT&T wanted to charge, plus $520 a month for 20 megabits.
Wow.
Sad. Go ahead, Joy. I know this is. I was waiting for you to jump in earlier, so.
Well, I had, unfortunately, my New Year's resolution was to never be late to this meeting again. And here it is, January 7th, and I've already blown it. It was just like, oh my God. So I was sure that you had already addressed broadband at the very beginning of your talk. It was the first thing that you wanted to, so that's why I've been quiet, just assuming everybody was just happy. The only thing, Victor, is I think you mentioned finding the companies to come in. Did you just say that? This is not, we can no longer rely on market solution. This is a question of public policy. And so that's why it's so important for the committee to take this on as something that the state needs to figure out how to fund. We just simply cannot go on this way. If we continue to wait to try to lure the telecommunications companies to do the right thing. We are simply going to spend another decade talking about it. And so I am under the, I believe that there are going to be, I hope there are going to be a number of bills in both houses to start to address any point of incursion you want to take, be it healthcare or water. We have a water plan that we cannot implement without broadband. We can't monitor water use. This has gone beyond the point of just letting the market take care of it. The state needs to step in, and I'm hoping that the state legislature will stand up and bring this situation to fruition this year.
Well, I can carry that message. I can't guarantee that, unfortunately.
Well, you know, I really like your item number 6 on my list, food access bill, but, you know, I would tie that to broadband access bill.
There you go.
You know, it's just that there are certain things that just need to happen, and food access is critical. Water, clean, safe water, we addressed that last year, made a lot of progress on that, but this broadband access for rural California just really needs to happen, and stop talking about it. We need to keep talking about it, but we need action on it.
Martha?
Just a small idea, and that I understand everybody's giving you ideas, but here is the fintech industry. The financial technology industry is moving fast and furious overseas, and they're investing because of that industry. The infrastructures that are investing across, like the Americas from Mexico down, are crazy amounts of money. Fintech is starting to be an impact in the United States, and they're starting to break this whole banking industry system. And they're starting to talk about, I was yesterday in Kansas City precisely at Sprint, and their core is fintech. And so maybe you might want to overlap a little bit and check the fintech industry and the committee and see what's going on, because that's where the investments are happening heavily into bandwidth and infrastructure for rural overseas. Why not happening here?
Victor, could I mention one more item?
Of course.
And that is, and I think this is it's reactivating the floodplain. And I think, you know, there's just an awful lot of win-win type of opportunities in reactivating the floodplain. The floodplain is largely made up of agricultural lands. And when we have programs that will incentivize private landowners to work with environmental NGOs to reactivate the floodplains for the benefit of fish and waterfowl or water birds, I think that is an amazing opportunity, and I would look to your committee to engage with that.
Yeah, yep. All right, any other questions for Victor? If not, I want to thank you for coming in. I think you got an earful.
I made the list for you.
Don't worry, I'll be also getting the, Josh will be giving me the transcript so I can
Yeah.
actually go through.
No, really appreciate you coming in and kind of on the spot here and filling in. So thank you again.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Victor.
All right, Secretary Ross, departmental update.
See, I took 2 weeks off, so it's like, it's a blank, it's all a blank, yes. And so December in particular was a lot of time spent on the budget, which we anticipate will be out later this week. So a lot of work going on around that, as well as the release, ta-da, of the water resilience portfolio on Friday afternoon. That was a lot of effort and really great collaboration with EPA, Resources Agency, and CDFA, and a number of other sub-departments of the Natural Resources Agency. So it is out now for public comment. Comments are due the first part of February. So it's good to have it out there and to see where we hit the mark and how people respond to it. The initial responses we've seen have been very, very positive. This month, I also participated, well, one was just yesterday. Secretary Crowfoot is doing something that is very innovative and clearly fits a priority of the governor, which is how do we do more good environmental work faster and at a larger scale, and how do we make government more efficient and more effective? That is very important to Governor Newsom. And so Secretary Crowfoot has created a partnership with the Land Stewardship Network to be the facilitator of an initiative called Cutting the Green Tape. And it's been a great process. We've had 2 workshops so far. We're very hopeful to have a white paper out early this year. And it's really about what are the barriers. We know there are good projects that happen. Some just get hung up because of perceived risk or other issues. And so what can we do internally to really accelerate the good work like what we know lots of our friends want to do in the Sacramento Valley as far as reconnecting the floodplains, helping the fish get food and all those other kinds of things. So I'm excited about this initiative, and I'm excited to be a partner with Secretary Crowfoot on that, because we know the number of landowners that are interested in doing this. They just need the signals that this is a good place for them to go and that there's going to be support for them to be able to get the permitting, which fortunately Ashley Boren and Sustainable Conservation have really perfected down on that. So that's been a really great thing. In December, I was at the Farm Bureau meeting for the presentation of the Leopold Award, which is jointly presented by Sustainable Conservation and the California Farm Bureau. And it was presented to Rominger Brothers. And Bruce Rominger, son of Rich Rominger, one of my predecessors, gave a wonderful, heartfelt speech. And he really paid tribute to his brother Charlie, who was the first in their family to really be a follower of Aldo Leopold, to the extent that his son's name is Aldo. But Aldo couldn't be with us because Cal Poly had finals, and he was the only family member that couldn't be with us. That's great. And then we've also started our work getting ready for the next session. The packaging bill, otherwise known as California Circular Economy, got held up on the last day of session, and we've already had a number of stakeholder meetings so that we can hit the ground running on that. Something to pay a lot of attention to because of single-use plastics and other packaging and the connection to food safety and food waste, so it gets complicated really fast, but a lot of good stakeholder involvement in that. V&D, we continue to have because of people moving sick birds out of the quarantine areas. We're not at the end of that yet. Staff is doing a tremendous job. I can't say enough good things about our staff there. And unfortunately, we had ACP and HLB that has now expanded the quarantine in Southern California, still not in commercial orchards, but it's hugely intense process to do the work that we do in that regard. And I'm happy to answer any questions. Oh, sorry, besides the food safety work, which Natalie's going to be reporting on, Undersecretary Lester Moffett has been involved with the chlorpyrifos alternatives work group. They will be holding workshops over the next couple of months, so they'll be out and about in the farming community and scheduling those meetings so we can get a lot of stakeholder input from communities as well. So that'll be something to watch for. Thanks.
Thank you, Secretary. Appreciate that.
I'm going to pass these around. So, making a transition, I've never been involved in a transition, so it was a hard year to do like a full report, what we did this year at CDFA. But I asked each one of our division directors to provide us, we're much more than numbers. We're about the people that do the work. But it's really eye-opening to see the numbers that we've posted for each division, just like numbers of inspections, number of licenses, number of grants. And so these are ones that have been posted so far. Another one will be posted today for Cal Cannabis. But we made these, they're an odd size because now we have it also that it's like works for mobile and online applications. But I will pass these around if you haven't taken a chance to look at those numbers online. It just shows the diversity of what we do at CDFA.
Excellent.
Planting Seeds blog. Planting Seeds. That was a blog that started 9 years ago.
Great. Okay, we're going to move on to the California Farm to School program. We have with us today Nick Enichich with the Office of Farm to Fork. Welcome, Nick. Nick is a lead for the California Farm to School program with CDFA's Office of Farm to Fork. The office is committed to helping all Californians access healthy, nutritious California-grown food. The Office of Farm to Fork connects with school districts and community members directly with California's farmers and ranchers. So, welcome.
Thank you. I'm really grateful to be here today. I'm just past my 1-year anniversary with CDFA.
Does that mean you're off probation?
I'm off probation.
All right.
They
You
let
can
me
say what
drive
you
a
really think.
Chevy Volt. And I just have to say, like, the leadership from the top down has been so incredible. It was like my first week I came to the state board presentation when the Center for Eco-Literacy was here talking about California Thursdays. So it feels like kind of a nice wrap on year one. I'm really excited to go into next year and work with all of you, so thank you. The California Farm to School Network, we're asking the question, how can we make it easier for schools to buy local food? And a lot of the time, if you ask a school food service director that question, they will say, my kids don't know and don't really care if it's local or not, right? Like, how does this become a priority for me? So in this conversation, we've really been trying to center the students in the conversation. And in doing that, it allows everybody to kind of get the right momentum. So the stakes in place around school meals are really, really huge across California. Every year, over 1 billion school meals are served in our state. According to the last USDA Farm to School census, we invested $167 million locally into our food system. So that's just school food purchases, where they're buying a local tomato, or where their distributor is sourcing locally. So a lot of the time the conversation ends right there, right? Because the power of procurement is huge for us at CDFA. But if you ask the question, who is eating school lunch? It's the 2 million children who are food insecure. And if they are not involved in the conversation, they will say, no thank you to that tomato, and just get whatever slice of pizza or whatever is there. So when we talk about farm to school with CDFA, we're talking about the power of procurement, because that's really important. And we're also talking about how does a school engage kids in this movement as well, because the kids are going to be the future workforce. They're going to be educated eaters, we hope, right? So that's the stakes. What is farm to school? There's 3 components of farm to school. The first one is local purchasing. So that's really clear. I would say all schools use a distributor to get enough food for their kids every day, but a lot of them are trying to do more direct purchasing from small, diverse farmers. I call it a lot where it's like I call it an Instagram farm and a food service director who's on Instagram a lot. And they send a direct message. This is like how things are happening right now. They're like, oh, that's a person who's really cool and local, and I saw them at the market. I'm gonna DM them and see if I can buy a case of tomatoes for for my salad bar. So the purchasing is really unique in that way. There's this other component of experiential learning. At the younger age levels, that looks like spending time in the school garden, going on a farm field trip. And at the older age groups, it's like career technical education, FFA programs, all that type of thing. And then the last component here is education in classrooms and cafeterias. And this is the most important piece, and the piece that I think we've really been able to highlight and lift out in this last year is combining the education happening in the classroom space to the cafeteria and turning the cafeteria into a learning environment. Because you hear it a lot, like, oh, if a kid grows a tomato, a kid's gonna eat a tomato. That's true in the garden, but when you take that tomato into the cafeteria and you wash it and you send it behind a closed door and then you bring it back out and put it on an all plastic salad bar, it doesn't look like the same tomato. So how do we bridge this gap? How do we let the kids know and have them experience that this is a whole food system where food's coming from a place into your cafeteria, it's still the same food? And how do you provide those wraparound services? I talked about FFA, and I've been working a lot with the Department of Education, and then I go to the different regional gatherings. And I was recently at one it was at Yosemite at the Tenaya Lodge. Yeah, it was a tough decision for me to go. I have a 2-year-old and a 1-year-old. I was like, quiet night, long drive, I'll be there. But, almost every ag educator in the room had like a 10-acre student-run farm. And I said, well, what do you do with the produce? One of them said, well, we go outside the Big O tires with all of our corn, and we try to sell it to the parents that come there. And it's really hard because then the educator has to work another Saturday. The whole family's involved in it, and I know that's like the culture of it. But I go, that food service director would absolutely love to buy all of that off of your hands and get all those FFA kids to buy lunch that day. So this is what we're trying to do is close that gap. Did you have? No, okay. So the next question is, what are the impacts and outcomes of farm to school? And I'm going to talk about research at the end as an additional need, but farm to school, there's like a million ways that you could plug into farm to school if you're interested. And it's something that has, I think, kind of held us back because everyone's like, everybody's an inch deep and nobody's going all the way into a complete farm to school program. So from the schools, or from the ag point of view, of course, there's increases in local spending with farm to school. From a superintendent's point of view, they'll look at academic achievement and English language learner engagement, because English language learners ask more questions when they're out in the garden or have a food-related lesson. That research just came out of New York, and it's something that like everybody is learning together in the garden. Yeah, so that's a huge one. For school food service directors, they care the most about participation in school meals, because if they can't get the kids to buy lunch, then they're losing money, right? And then the last one, which is the one where I think a lot of the grassroots farm to school organizing has been happening, is school culture and camaraderie and parent and community involvement. So I used to work at Soil-Born Farms in Rancho Cordova, doing food systems and urban ag work there, and before that I worked at Sac High as the school garden and culinary teacher, and that's where we lived. Oh yeah, we're building school culture. We're creating a place, right? The students have a place to belong in the garden. The parents who might not be comfortable in the classroom really love coming to an event where we're doing pizzas in our wood-burning pizza oven out in the garden. Like, they're not gonna go to the back-to-school night in the class, they're gonna come to the garden. So it's a really unique set of outcomes that you can look at for farm to school and kind of find your way. It is a national movement. In California, we're the leader. I'll get to that. But nationally, it's a bipartisan movement. It's not like these other issues that you were just talking about, where it's really hard, it's really contentious and there's a lot of critical things. It's like, look, it's really great. Kids eat local food. It helps the farmers. It helps the community. So this administration actually just doubled the amount available in the USDA Farm to School grant. It went from $5 million to $10 million. Nationally, 42% of districts participate, and according to that last census, which we just did the one this year, so we'll have the data next year, but according to the 2015 census, $789 million invested locally in food. 44 states have farm to school policies, so everybody's got them. Mostly it's like we're contracting with the extension to do like advising for farm to school, or we're creating state level positions, but also some states have incentivized purchasing programs. Oregon has a $10 million program where they offset the cost of local produce. So if you're gonna buy an Oregon apple instead of a Washington apple, and it's 2 cents more per unit or whatever, then they get that cost offset. It's a great way to do it because at the governmental level, you're looking at invoices instead of trying to calculate their meals and what constitutes an Oregon-grown meal and those types of things. In addition to that $10 million, a small portion of it, I think 20%, is available for like school garden education and those wraparound services in order to help that local procurement work. So it's the model policy that people look to. California is a little bit different. So in California, we have 55% of districts, so 11% more are participating. That's 373 districts, 3.4 million kids. Also on that census, 16% of districts who said they weren't doing farm to school currently were planning to start farm to school activities. So it means that it's going to continue to grow and grow. When I was talking about how we're different from a state like Oregon or a state like Vermont, which has great farm to school policies, I was like, man, it must be great to be the Vermont Farm to School Network coordinator. Your drives are all like, half hour. You get to one part of the state. In the winter is tough, I guess. But we have LA Unified and San Diego Unified. LA Unified serves 734,000 kids are enrolled there. San Diego Unified has 130,000 kids. And then if you compare that to, that's Calistoga Joint Unified, had 849 students. All of those districts are doing farm to school at different levels, but you can see that like the San Diego Unifieds and the LA Unifieds, if there was a $10 million incentive, they could swallow that up, no problem. And then what's happening to the rest of the state? They're left with nothing. And then if you scale it back so that it's equitable distribution of the funds, well, now why would LA opt in? Because it's going to be so small compared to their overall budget. So it's a really interesting dynamic in California, and it's something that I think we just have to recognize as we continue to talk about it. The Department of Education oversees school lunch and school meals, so I work really closely with them, and they've been a great partner and collaborator. They do compliance for the federal program, so they have people out on the ground checking refrigerator temperatures, checking invoices and price logs, all the student information that they need to do. They're also then doing training and resources to make sure that everyone can meet compliance. They've integrated farm to school into all of those activities. So in that welcome training, there's a slide on farm to school that now has my contact information. It's basically just like, there's a human there who can help you, which is great. They also developed, prior to me starting, they developed this whole menu of, it's a recipe book of seasonal local produce that can be, it's at school scale. So if you're serving 100,000 kids, they have the recipe in that way. They're kid tested by school food service directors, which is great. What does CDFA do? We have the Office of Farm to Fork, which works on food access, farm to school, and communication and collaboration. The tool I wanted to highlight really is the California Farmer Marketplace, which is our digital relationship builder. So food service director will go on there and create their profile and say, here's what I buy, here's in what quantities, here's what I'm looking for. And then a farmer will go on, create a profile that says, here's what I grow, here's where I'm located, here's all this stuff. And then they can either shop by price, the food service director can shop by price, or they can do a geographic filter to get whoever's closest, which is really important to a lot of schools. Yeah.
I had a question exactly about that. When they consider local, what are they talking about? What's the distance?
Yeah, so everybody makes it up, which is a little bit interesting. So we always say California grown is local. I work with people in Del Norte and San Diego, and so they say, well, but everybody agrees that California grown is like what's most important for the most case. A lot of schools have multiple definitions. So on their bid, they're allowed to use geographic preference. So they might put geographic preference, layer 1 is within 200 miles, is San Diego within 200 miles in the southern border, shorts that a little bit, But they say within 200 miles, and then after that, it's California grown, and then after that, it's wherever you can get it. So that's the model we look at and share with schools. So this is the majority of my work is the California Farm to School Network. We have about 4,000 members. I send out a monthly newsletter. We don't really do resource development this time. It's more resource organization, because I'm sure if you've looked now, like if you're Googling something, whether it's symptoms for like an illness or something, or whatever you're Googling. I used to do this all the time when I worked at Soilborn. We were working in the orchard. Be like, oh, what is that? You take a picture of it, and then you're Google image searching. There's like a million things it could be, and you're not ready to do that. We're organizing all the resources for people so that it's really easy to digest. We do training. So we did a leadership training this year in Northern California and Southern California. Partner development. California, we have really been leading the nation on this grassroots farm to school movement. Some of the organizations that are leading it are the Center for Eco-Literacy is doing a great job with California Thursdays, like you've heard from. the Edible Schoolyard, which is Alice Waters' nonprofit. They're spreading nationwide. They have Edible Schoolyard locations. Then there's Life Lab, who's our school garden partner. They've been doing school garden education for 40 years. They just had their anniversary celebration. And there's a number of different organizations that are doing great work. And what's kind of happened is that they are nonprofits that started locally. They did really good work. So then they went to kind of where the energy and action is with different districts. Then they became the national we're the national partner for the Farm to School Network in California. Those organizations also became partners at that national level. So everybody's kind of spread out and scattershot, and it's our network's job to fill in the gaps and make sure that everybody is getting the training and leadership and resources that they need in order to get success. So that's really important. The last two things on there are the California Farm to School and School Garden Conference, which is coming up in 2020. We're really excited about that. We just sent out the save the date. I can send more info if you want it. Yeah, you'll be there. And then the last thing is social capital. I talked about like Oregon has this program. People love going and talking to the Oregon agency that's doing the grant making because they think, oh, now I got the inside track on the grant. Because we aren't doing grant making at this time, what we have is social capital. So as I go out and engage new partners in new schools and go talk to them, my real goal is to find out what are they working on, what are their pressure points, what's really hard right now, and how can I identify a resource and play matchmaker to make that happen. It's been really fun, and it's something that is super important as I've been working in the network. And it's kind of like I'm working both directions, like, the tin can telephone of I'm on the network and then I'm coming up for air and talking to the state level. So it's been good. In this year, the kind of biggest accomplishment I think we've had is our Farm to School listening tour. So when I started in this position, it had been like 6 months since we had somebody in this role. So the network was kind of like, what's happening? Where are you? What's going on? So I went on a statewide listening tour to re-engage everyone and ask the question of like, what is happening with your program? What's important to you? What challenges are there? What successes are there? And these were the 4 biggest things that came out. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time on them. The first one is increasing school district investment. So farm to school is a priority. It's not the priority. Everybody loves it, like I said, but how do you get it up the ladder has been a real challenge. So the picture there is of YOLO Farm to Fork, and they support 75 different schools and partners in Yolo County. They do school garden education as well as help with local procurement and farmer relationship building. It's a really great program, and they get no money from their school district in order to do this work. It's all private fundraising, which is great, but it's not necessarily sustainable for that crew of 3 people and rotating college interns to be able to provide a level of service that's necessary. So we're talking to the superintendents who have invested in Farm to School and finding out, why are you doing that? What's made it that important to you? The next thing is more training opportunities. Just across the board, food service directors, school garden educators, teachers, principals, everyone wants to learn and go further down their road. The Department of Education does a great job on those, that broad education, I would say, but I think there's opportunity for a deep dive into Farm to School. The last 2 are related. So it's that focus on complete programs, like I talked about, closing the loop is really important, and improving the research. So those outcomes that I talked about before, they're definitely there, but a lot of them are qualitative at this point, like measuring school culture and things like that. It's like a survey of 30 kids who were in the garden all year. One of the academic achievement things that gets used is from a group of 15 students from Texas A&M in 1996. So it's like, we need to update our research on Farm to School and actually get these true outcomes of when you have a complete program in place. How does that impact student preference and student meal choices and things like that? What impact is that having on procurement when a food service director isn't putting up a yield sign because they don't think kids care about local food? There's a lot of things there. So the successes that have been happening. So one of the highlights I just had to call out was I was lucky enough a few months ago to do a couple tours with the first partner, Jen Siebel-Newsome, as well, and the secretary as well. The secretary braved a whole drive to and back from Turlock with me, and it was so fun for me to be able to do it. So Turlock is a great school when you're looking at farm to school, and I'm just going to tell the story of the pictures. So the one on the left, I just took them off the internet, so there's the little arrows, but the one on the left, we are at the Turlock Unified School District Student Farm, which is run by their FFA program, which gets ag incentive money, and it gets CTE money at the state level and the federal level, and they do their own fundraisers locally. And it's a FFA initiative, like I said. At the student farm, we had the CTE culinary path, Career Technical Education culinary pathway. Those students prepared this really delicious meal with produce from the student farm, which I think is a 6-acre farm, so pretty impressive. And what this is highlighting is the workforce development aspect of this. So the teacher who's in the middle of that photo, who you can't really see, her family runs a restaurant in Woodland, and a lot of those kids work at that restaurant now. And if you know any chefs, they're always talking about, we need better line cooks. So there's your future generation of line cooks and restaurant managers, and all the way up is coming through culinary. And then you think, well, how do you get kids interested in that in high school? It starts at the elementary school level with this school garden program. So this is the secretary and the first partner talking to these kids who knew so much about this garden. It was amazing. And the teacher talked about how they're more engaged out there. So there's this pipeline on the educational side, and leadership in the rural communities values FFA, values culinary. They understand everything that's happening, so it's great. Then there's the school kitchen side. This is Scott Soyseth. He's been the food service director at Turlock for over 20 years. He's retiring in March. And Scott has received every award a school food service director can receive, which is really impressive. And they have a central kitchen there that he designed and built with school food services money by running such a great program. They raised enough money to do this. It's an old auto mall dealership that was gutted and then turned it, it's already great because it's all concrete floors and all that stuff. So it's already ready for a kitchen. And he started off, he bought an old rotisserie that, like for chickens out of a grocery store, he bought it on eBay. And he brought it in and he started cooking whole chickens. So bringing scratch cooking back to schools. They use the white meat. Now it's all like legit rotisseries, huge one. But they use the white meat for salads on the salad bar, and they prep all that, and then they serve the legs, thighs, and wings as separate entrees. They also procure all their food, not all of it, but a large percentage locally. One great thing that Scott was able to do is work with Foster Farms to develop a new product for schools. So the regulations changed, so they needed hormone-free chicken, and he worked with the local company in order to make that happen. Turlock serves, I think it's 26,000 kids every day. So that's a lot of purchasing power, and you can see how it shifts the market. This is the last one. A success story is the picnic at the Capitol. So every year, school gets out. They go to summertime, and the kids who are relying on school meals for maybe 3 meals a day don't know where to go a lot of the time. So schools have started developing these summer feeding programs that are really robust. And the Sacramento Summer Meals Collaborative is a number of school districts that work together to procure local food and serve it to kids. 2 of the schools have food trucks where they go to different public pools and serve to kids where they're at because they can't get them to come back to school in the summer. But that's an example of a school lunch entree. So it's chicken street tacos is the meat option, and then the vegetarian option is a potato and white bean taco. They call it ensalada de fruta con chile, but it's, fruit with tahini. It's very delicious. And then it's a cucumber and tomato salad and some rice on the side. So anybody who's saying that school meals are gross now, they're getting really good, and it's a marketing issue. So here's what we're doing 2020 and beyond. We want to develop farm-to-school demonstration sites where we have these model programs that have all the components working together, then use those demonstration sites to create a roadmap to success, and also to price out what it takes to transition a school from a traditional school lunch to a transformational farm-to-school lunch. instead of just like throwing numbers at the wall for, oh, if we got this much for procurement, it would fix everything. So we want the real research to be done. We want to increase collaboration across state agencies. So that means working with the Department of Education, Department of Public Health, Social Services. Everybody has a piece of school lunch, which is really interesting. We're going to host our conference and then expand regional trainings. Those are our goals right now, and to kind of become a professional development organization, I think, as well as a network. Just like the small farm advisors go out and provide support, we want to be able to have a team that goes out as well. So I have just my contact info on that one, and I'm sure it's on the agenda and everything, and Josh sent it out. So questions? I know that's a
Great.
lot of
Thank you, Nick.
information.
We'll open it up for questions. I guess I had one.
Yeah.
Do you deal with individuals? I mean, is it varied throughout the state where you may have a district with one school that may want to participate, or is it the district?
So, yeah.
How's that work?
Well, that's a good question. So most districts have multiple school sites, and I think San Diego Unified actually has like 120 school sites. And so it is at that district level that they decide what's going to happen. But what does happen inside that school food ecosystem is that there's a school kitchen manager at each site. And if that manager has a culinary background, or if they're much more comfortable with the ingredients, they can normally get some flexibility from the district level in order to do more farm to school type activities. But then that person switches schools, they leave the district, something happens and they lose that momentum.
Joy?
Thank you very much for your presentation. Where is the conference being held?
The conference is going to be in San Diego. Yeah. Yeah, I tried. We tried. I still just go, I'm new to the state agency, It used to be nonprofit. There's like, as soon as you can book it, so it's good now to go through the process. So it'll be San Diego. We're finalizing the contract now with the venue. It's 240 participants, so we're excited about it.
Rochelle?
Hi, Nick. I remember speaking with
Yeah.
you on the phone. I know you didn't touch on those last couple of slides on the reimbursement rates, but I think it's an important piece in this, because where my experience has been is the reason we're not getting buy-in from a lot of school districts and superintendents is because at the end of the day, it's about the dollar amount. So how do you, I know you're working with Department of Education. It really needs to be a collaboration and has to be buy-in, and the technical assistance piece is an important part of it. But maybe you can just share a little bit about what you see doing in 2020 a little bit different, so that you can address from the top down and also the dollar issue.
Yeah, if we can actually get the presentation back up, I have the reimbursement rates on one of the slides. So we can look at them. So the federal government does the majority of reimbursement. For a free meal, you get reimbursed $3, and I'm glad I wrote this down. I added the slides yesterday. Oh, so it's on there. So $3.41. And then for a reduced price meal, it's like $3.10, whatever it is. Mostly what we have to do is, then California reimburses additionally on top of that, 0.2368 or something like that cents. So it's convoluted math, but what we have to do is just share the best practices. And what we've seen is that if you can get kids to eat the lunch, your budget will increase and you'll have more dollars to spend. So Natomas Unified is a great example of that. Vince Kegwin is the food service director there, and he has a background in culinary hospitality. And so he came into it really with a lot of ability to make change. And so this is the rates on the left are the lunch program, and then on the right are the breakfast program. But Vince's budget started out at $3 million based on the participation rates in his first year, and now his budget's up to $6 million based on increased participation. So if you can get the kids engaged in the process, and that means that like we're not serving meatloaf to kids anymore in school lunch, or like you think kids want to eat chicken nuggets and pizza all the time, but then you do a crowdsourcing thing out at school lunch and they say they want pozole and they maybe want tacos and burritos, but it's like really reflective of those kids and the background, the food that they're eating. I don't mean to bring up like stereotypical food items, but those are really common school lunch items. So it's about giving the food service directors the tools to communicate communicate the value to their board, which is a huge one. Like, believe me when I say this investment will work. And then giving them the know-how on the ground to develop those recipes and menu items and engage kids. I'm going to talk for another bullet point on it is just that there's a lot of organizations that give like, here's how you teach a school lunch provider, how you get them to engage kids in the school lunch line. And we're turning our school lunch kitchen staff into educators when you're literally in a building and a campus full of professional educators. And so we need to better bring the districts together to coordinate those activities. So that's really the solution.
Great job, Nick. I'm just curious, you're doing a great job on this, and I appreciate all the effort you're making, and particularly in the group, the K through 12. That's very, very important. But are you working with any community colleges or universities?
So I have met with UC Davis and Tom Tomich to talk about the extension's role and what we can do there. But again, like the secretary said at the beginning of the meeting, they don't have the structure to support at this time. With the community colleges, there's been a lot of momentum, and they have a position called sector navigators, which are workforce development people who bridge the gap between high schools and the community colleges and the workforce to develop programs that help kids, enter the workforce. So one example is that at Woodland Community College, they got a grant to develop a middle college so that the high school students in the county, so what are the schools out there? I forget. Esparto is part of it, but anyway, they're all out there. But the kids who are in those ag programs can simultaneously take classes at the community college level, graduate high school with an associate's degree, and be ready to join a farm. And the culinary programs also have that in different places. Santa Rosa has it as well. So community colleges have had more.
Thank you so much. Here are a couple ideas.
Yeah, I love it.
Go ahead and check the contracts that have happened in the last 5 years from federal contracting into schools.
Yeah.
What we have here, what we say we get paid by the schools or per kid versus what it really gets paid at the end of the year.
Yeah.
And you see a little bit of surplus money there. It's going to be a task. It's a little bit tough, and there are people doing it right now on federal level because there's monies that are being not spent on kids and going somewhere else. That's a very important element, and it's going to be a tough road to go. I know people are having a tough road to go in that, but you might find the funding because one school at a time is much harder if you impact whole, and because we know that underserved communities are getting less funding, not funding per se money, but what they're getting in the food systems. And that is important for our minority communities across the country because not well nutrition kids not perform, right? So that's one place to go. And then the second one is the contracts that exist today on the food service industry for the school districts are managed by these great companies who contract with farmers. And those farmers, which in this California tend to be our own farmers, could be engaged in these farm-to-farm school programs because they are farmers.
Yeah.
They can be more engaged with the schools. They would like to be more engaged with the schools because they will raise the ratio of food intake, but also it will raise the income for the farmer, which is where I was going into. The farmer are getting less money on the food program that they should be getting. That's why.
So do more direct.
Go to the contractors
Okay.
of the food programs, and I know that the Department of Education here manages that, but you at the school program can see who they are and start working with them to work with the farmers that are contracted already for those contracts, and they can be more engaged, and they have the resources, and they want to work, but there are too many middle people in between to get directly to the school systems.
Yeah, okay,
Okay?
thank you.
Thank you, Nick. Hey, Nick, I was wondering, are there any synergies between the food banks and the farm-to-food or farm-to-fork and schools?
Yeah, so that was something that we showed the first partner. So it's a relationship that I think is starting to happen. In my years at Soilborn just 2 years ago, we really started working with the Sacramento Food Bank and Sac City schools to do food distributions at school sites, and they were hugely successful. It's happening in Yolo County with the Yolo Food Bank is doing it. And then I know in LA it's happening as well with Food Forward. It's something that we're going to talk about at the conference and try to kind of bring up energy for it and see who's doing it. But the Association of Food Banks is one of the partners that I meet with and speak with. So we're looking to partner that more, but it's huge.
We had a member of the board named Rodney here he wasn't an inspiration. Do you know Rodney?
From farm to school?
Yeah, he was a food procurement.
Rodney Taylor?
Yeah,
Rodney
exactly
Taylor.
right.
Yeah, I know Rodney.
Right on. Yeah, exactly, Nick. You know, he moved to the East Coast. We lost him.
He's back.
Virginia, son of a
Yes.
gun. But man, rock
Back
star.
now, but he
exactly.
retired. Yeah.
Thank you for a wonderful presentation. I noticed we hired a new food service director a number of years ago in our little community, and she went to a California Grown type program,
Yeah.
and things changed dramatically. Then we went to a breakfast program, and once we went to the breakfast program, things changed a little in that parents were bringing their kids to school and then standing on the wall watching their children eat. And I don't know how common that is in other communities, but this is like at the primary school and the middle school. And so there's a lot of education going on, not only with the children, but the children educating the parents, and the parents getting educated by what they observe. Are you providing, are there any resources to provide to those parents that might show up, be they murals on a wall or pictures on a wall, or, just to kind of help add to that education?
Yeah, it's a really common thing that especially happens in summer feeding programs where the kids have to get dropped off at the library or wherever, and then the parents aren't actually allowed to eat the food, so they have to watch. And it's really hard. And so what's a lot of schools have started doing that are a little more advanced in the program is that they'll offer family and community cooking classes as well. So the Edible Schoolyard in Berkeley did a really great job with this. They have a kitchen classroom they have at a middle school. And they said, we want to engage more parents in this. We know that they're interested. And they said, we wanted to make these parent and family cooking classes as convenient as possible for families to come. So they started partnering with like the sports teams and the parents and families who were already there after school, and then inviting them in and saying, okay, today we're going to work with you. So there's a lot of resources and stuff like that out there, but it's kind of, they're still worried about feeding the kids, let alone bringing the parents in.
So thank you very much. Very exciting program, and really so appreciative of the work that you're doing to bring it together. Are you able, you mentioned the importance of doing more research. Are you able to actually document kind of the depth and the breadth of the work that these schools are doing in terms of their procurement and changes in their contracts over time, whether or not they, sort of what's the way that you measure whether people are actually buying local or not in those long-term contracts and that kind of thing?
Yeah, it's been really hard to track it. A lot of the time there was a study done where they looked at the distributor invoices and the items that have an L next to it is saying local. And so then they tried to track, well, it says local on it. They look at the box, they scan the box, and they find out, oh, that one wasn't one of the local items. So it's really hard just because there's so many moving pieces in such scale that they're not always able to track it. These schools that have been working with California Thursdays and those types of things, they're a little more advanced in their tracking. So, and procurement is one of the easier things to measure in all of this. So they're looking at invoices and just identifying the farms. And sometimes distributors don't always want to share where their source is. I don't know if it's because they can't or if they're protecting something. But, so we're trying to engage them and open that door a little bit.
And then, not meaning to pile on as you just say that, but also just thinking about the ability to get sort of exponential benefit from the purchasing. sort of, I've been schooled deeply by Paula Daniel and the Center for Good Food Purchasing and
Yeah.
those folks, but really thinking about also getting more bang for your buck in terms of focusing on regenerative ag, local ag, and then we also just heard about the challenges for diverse and small farmers and the ability to kind of begin to track some of that as well. Certainly, being able to focus those dollars in terms of the purchasing power of school districts around some of those other issues as well would be really terrific if that's something that you all can and do.
Yeah, I hope it's something that will emerge on that roadmap to success we were talking about, where we can kind of track a school's transformation. A lot of it, like this happened in Napa, where they went to the farmer's market to meet local, small, diverse farmers, and she said, you know, it was in the winter season, she said, I'm going to buy all your cherry tomatoes next year. Just fill the field, get it all. So the first, and she said, I'll buy any size, because you can portion those out great for school. And for 2 weeks, she was able to deliver. And then in the third week, she couldn't, she had half. And then the fourth week, she had a quarter. And so how do we scale up those relationships in a way that's sustainable for both partners? Because then the food service director was mad. And I was like, that's a little unrealistic. And the farmer, of course, probably didn't feel great either. So we're working on those things. Yeah. Sorry, yeah.
My question is your greater need still dollars? Your budget has been increased, which is great, or is it recognition of what you're doing?
Well, I would say both, because we need to get parents to recognize what's happening with school lunch, because they're still sending kids in and saying, don't eat school lunch. I'd rather buy you something even if it's processed and packaged in place of a nutritious, delicious meal. So I think the marketing really needs to start happening to parents. Kind of the industry knows what's happening. And then funding-wise, we still need the support on the ground to help people develop all these resources. And
School nutrition directors have one of the hardest jobs. There's no easy jobs in school,
Yeah.
but then people come with them of these expectations for this and this and this and this. So I'm just going to requote Jamie Johansson, because Farm Bureau is very much an advocate for California food for California kids. But he said it's not about whether it's an organic carrot versus a conventional carrot. It's about having a carrot instead of a Cheeto. And that takes a whole
Yeah.
community to work together to focus on job number one. And if we start with California grown, and then if people want to put these ornaments on it, and there's discretionary funding, but school nutrition directors have to have flexibility. They have a very hard job, very hard job.
yeah. I'm going to bring you to all my meetings.
Yep, there you go. All right, Nick.
That's right.
They're very creative business people.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Nick. Really appreciate your presentation and your answering all our questions today. I know we had a lot. So we're going to move on to the California Census 2020 with Sonia Logman. Sonia Logman is the Chief of Staff for the California Complete Count Census 2020. The Complete Count works to ensure that Californians get their fair share of federal resources and congressional representation by encouraging the full participation of all Californians in the Census 2020. So there you go. Welcome.
Thank you. Welcome indeed. Oh, thank you, Secretary. And of course, what fortuitous planning of the agenda for me to follow such a spectacular presentation. And they are directly connected, ironically. Well, first of all, thank you so much, Chair Cameron and all the members of the board for allowing us to spend a little bit of time. I want to, before we begin, introduce one of our Rockstar team members that I brought along with me, Yumi Sarah. She started with the census team as one of our regional program managers, focused on all of Northern California, so Sacramento to the border. So there's all kinds of fun challenges with that geography, as you can imagine. And since then, the governor has promoted her to serve as our Deputy Director of Statewide Initiatives. So that means working with the business community, working with state agencies, among others. So just wanted to make sure to also give her a warm introduction. So the census is quite an opportunity. Once every 10 years. And so we just wanted to walk you through really quickly kind of what our role is as an unprecedented investment that the governor and the legislature have made in our 2020 education campaign efforts, walk you through the strategy to hopefully help calibrate your ideas and thinking, because we need as many folks on board to share our message as possible. Talk a little bit about what you're going to see in the media and kind of how we're approaching messaging, and then also how you can help us spread the word. So, and then we'll leave some time for questions too. So really want to make sure this is crystal clear. The federal government is doing all the counting. So I went from counting pot plants to now talking about counting people, right? So a little bit different. No, thankfully, only in quantity. And so our team is really focused on what I like to call probably one of the biggest civic engagement experiments of our time. We are investing quite a bit in sort of a two-prong approach, so ground outreach activities as well as paid media to supplement that. And again, all in the vein of driving people to be motivated to complete the census form. So as you heard so much about the importance of school nutrition and opined on some of the good things that work needs to do, super excited to share that the USDA actually uses census data to help make funding determinations for school lunch nutrition programs, as well as other things like CalFresh and SNAP. In addition to sort of the distribution of federal dollars down to the state, there are two other ways that we use census data primarily in government. Also our federal representation, how that congressional house gets split up and apportioned. And then our Department of Finance also uses census data to take state dollars and draw them down to counties and local governments. So important note for our team here in California. In terms of just a high-level picture of what you should expect to receive as a Californian, while Census Day is one day of the calendar, it feels like the longest get out the count effort possible, with many weeks involved. So mid-March, an initial postcard will go out to folks. It's the first ever online census. So that means that you'll be able to access the census through the federal government's website in multiple languages. So super cool that the federal government has invested in this new level of language access. And so you'll get that card with your invitation and a special number. Yes, the U.S. Census Bureau goes through a pretty robust process, working with our Postal Service, local governments, to contemplate new housing that will be available within the census enumeration period. Would like to note that there's a special caveat with P.O. boxes. Those houses that do not have, like many of our ranches and farms, sort of the traditional postal route may have a P.O. box, will receive their questionnaire differently. So, and I can tell you a little bit more about where we can share that information as well. So the Census Bureau will then continue to remind you and continue to remind you. And then on that fourth try in mid-April, with your fourth postcard, if you haven't replied online through self-responding about your household, they'll go ahead and ship you out a questionnaire. And then if you don't respond yet still after that fourth reminder, you can expect what you may sort of think of when you think of the census, a federal government employee, perhaps coming to your door to knock, beginning May, June, July. And then once July wraps up, in the height of fair season, mind you, the federal government will wrap up and start to count beans to make sure to ship numbers back to the president by the end of the year. So just to kind of note what is coming through the spring and summer. So if you take away anything from that message, look out for that postcard and remember to try to get it done in the month of April. So as I mentioned, we have an unprecedented investment. Our team is managing just under $200 million to reach the hardest to count Californians. And we are doing that with an incredible, mighty team of 35 full-time employees, as well as many, many contracted partners that already do work in the community and are trusted messengers. just to give you a little bit better snapshot, you'll see that the largest piece of that pie is going to those trusted messengers through outreach. So we've divided our entire state into 10 regions, and I'll tell you a little bit more about what that picture looks like. But really important to note that these dollars are going directly to communities who are the trusted folks that are already doing work in those communities to make sure that our most vulnerable populations understand what the census is, what's at stake, and have all of the ways that they need to access that information. You'll also note the media campaign is the other sort of large portion of what we're focused on. $47 million between production and our paid media buy, which I'll also talk a little bit about later. And then we have roughly $30 million that's left to be appropriated that our team is trying to really shore up any last minute areas where we feel like resource constraints have been a challenge to our outreach partners. So we anticipate the bulk of those dollars will supplement that orange pie and make it a little bit bigger as we move forward. So as I mentioned, we really have had a handful of goals for maximizing how we're putting these resources to use. We are working, as I mentioned, with trusted messengers and community voices. We are focused on the hard to count, and I'll talk about the data that we're using for that. We're also working to facilitate culturally appropriate engagement. So that's not just translation, that's actually trans-adaptation. Really working with communities that are limited English proficient or those that don't start with English as their first language to make sure that they feel comfortable with the materials and really understanding how to, again, access the census. And the other big thing that we're really focused on for this next year is combating disinformation. We know people get their information from a variety of sources, so we want to make sure that what they're getting is quite right. So as I mentioned, we are focused on the hardest to count. We, in partnership with the Department of Finance, as our team started to build, took 14 different vulnerable characteristics and put those together in what we're calling an index to locate where the hard to count are. So, as we are all fans of maps, this helps us take those factors. So, as I mentioned, limited English proficient, perhaps low broadband areas. Other issues like multi-dwelling housing that may make response more complicated, and really trying to quantify that. So we used a very specific data set from the American Community Survey, which is a 5-year average, to help us formulate this, and this is what our funding decisions have been based off of, as well as how our outreach partners are targeting their efforts on the hardest to count tracks. So what that really means is about 1 in 4 Californians. So that $200 million is being invested in specifically, roughly, 11.5 million folks. So the more than 70 contracted partners that we have are focused in the reddest of red areas that you see here. As you can see, big population in the Central Valley, as well as down in Los Angeles, which is sort of amplified. I know it looks very gray in this bottom photo that you have, or bottom capture, but it is quite interesting to see in person. And if anyone ever wants to get on our sword tool, that's what it's called, happy to get you guys login so you can check it out. So as I mentioned, we have lots of different partners. The 10 regions that we've split up California into all have what we call an administrative CBO. So that's really sort of our hub for all of the work that's happening. As an example, in Southern California, our administrative CBO is working with more than 100 partners and looks to fund even more. As well as the state funding in Los Angeles is, I'll look to Yumi, I think roughly 1/3 of all of Los Angeles County's ACBO's funding. So philanthropy is another major partner that stepped up to help share the message. So this isn't just an investment of the state of California, but certainly also local government as well as those philanthropic entities. We have statewide CBOs that are focused on more ethnically focused outreach. For example, we have a couple different organizations focused on our Latino community, African American community, Asian Pacific Islander community, our Middle Eastern and North African community, and so on. We also have, as I mentioned, business partners and others focused in rural specific strategies, and we have created a partnership in acknowledging, I think, the astute comment from Martha about going to one school versus many schools. The network of schools has tied in with curriculum and some ways to help our little ones understand how to talk to mom and dad about the importance of the census, but also our higher education institutions, and of course partnerships with state agencies. Certainly appreciate Secretary Ross and her team stepping up as always. So, how are we reaching rural populations? I figured this might be something the folks around this team and table would be interested in, and want you to feel comfortable that it's sort of not any one thing or area that we're doing, but really an integrated approach. So how are we reminding folks about issues that are important to rural California? How are we making sure that despite the challenges with low broadband and the fact that it's an online for the first time census, that we're overcoming some of those challenges and reaching out to the specific populations through innovative programming, particularly through our paid media effort. We do have an opportunity to host a farm worker lunchtime program. So as developments there also continue, it's really trying to find people where they are and trying to make it as easy as possible for them. Additionally, we are looking at some more partners. If you can maybe imagine, while we aren't ready to announce, perhaps folks with little hats on, or maybe beautiful blue jackets. We may have some more opportunities to reach more Californians through some other established organizations that are community-based. In addition, have already had a chance to work with what I love about our communities, our many fairgrounds, and of course, our Health and Human Services Agency is stepping up in a big way given all of the direct service delivery that they do. Focusing a little bit on the media campaign, probably more detail than you want or need, but really just wanted to show you that since July, our team has really dug in deep, really understanding messaging, going out and doing focus groups in the community and building a message that's going to matter and resonate. The federal government is putting a lot of resources in California relative to ad buys, but we are up against a political window which increases funds, and so really trying to make sure that we maximize and take that federal buy and our state buy and bring those together, and then also that it complements the work our locals are doing. As I mentioned, all the work in language specific trans adaptation. You'll notice here that we even took the time to convert our logo, which should also look very familiar to those in the administration. Really, there is no message that could better carry the California for all than the census, given our charge to find and count and educate Californians. We also have a partner portal, so as our different teams, those many contractors are coming up with messages and ideas in ways to connect with their communities that matter, that work can amplify and extend. We took some of our data and created some thresholds for what different counties would need to cover relative to the languages that we know are spoken in those particular areas. And so this allows for some cross-collaboration and for our partners to go above and beyond and even more that they've already committed to. Just a little sample of some door hangers and a quick flyer so you get a sense of some of our creative content that will start to roll out. Super excited that our radio ads will begin to air next week, and TV will follow in February, and then we'll sort of continue to ramp up and amplify with some fun April 1st, not April Fool's Day, Census Day messaging, and hopefully Secretary will be out and about and be able to share in the fun with us on that. And lastly, just wanted to share a couple things that we feel like you could do now. So we've got a couple different presents on social media that are a really great way to find little snippets, quick things to learn about the census. We're really focused on early education now to make sure that when folks get their forms, they don't even have to think, what is the census or why does it matter? We're trying to get some of those questions and answers out early. Our director, Ditas Katugi, this is her third census, so she has such a wealth of knowledge. Her 2020 wish for all Californians is to tell 20 friends. So it's got a pretty nice ring to it, easy to remember. So as you're, celebrating friends and family around hopefully a table with California-grown produce, as well as fresh cut flowers and some beautiful sparkling wine, you can tell them about the importance of the census. On a UC Davis campus in a farm-to-school farm. And then lastly, we have started a partnership with one of our contractors, Ready Nation, who is working to build a census pledge for our many, many businesses. And so we'll look forward to sharing more about that in the coming weeks. And so that's kind of who we are, what we're doing, why it matters, and how you can help us out. And so I'll ask Yumi to come join me, if you don't mind, in case anyone has any questions. And I speak without breathing, apparently.
Well, today's been my day, huh? So I'm going to wear another hat here, which is my cartooning hat, okay? I'm a cartoonist. So, last census, last one that we did, I was fully engaged because for many reasons. But long story short is that minority communities react very well to cartoons or storytelling.
Yes.
Or the
Fairly indigenous communities.
But Hispanics, if you go from Mexico down, everything is cartoon. If you go to Asia, everything is cartoon.
Yes,
It's a cartoon society.
yes.
So, and the parents, especially because they are the ones who are going to hold back going to the census, telling the story. And I remember this because we did it with Daisy, the lady who led the whole Hispanic agency across the country. She did, and she knows that Daisy Esposito has done 2, like your pro lady has done 2 census. That was that, specifically storytelling, cartooning, the fotonovela kind of thing, because we can relate to it. We're novela people, right? So just please, because this looks so serious, so it becomes too government, too not enticing. So just ideas, and if you need any data, there's tons of data from Mr. Walt Disney that shows that tough things in overseas through cartooning, even to do the polio things and stuff like that through cartooning, people react better.
And I would love Yumi maybe just to give a quick update on our partnership with First Five, which I think will also be a good resource.
Yeah.
So we're working. Hi, hello, friends. I know some of you from different places, but in terms of cartoons, we're working with the First Five Association. They're one of our major partners. They're also working with WIC and with Head Start. And we do have, through some of their channels, we do have a book that's really, really cool, actually, for smaller children.
Smaller children, but
Yeah.
let me give you a little data. The twin kids, the 8 to 12, are the third parents in our communities. They're the ones who read all the materials for the parents, who give the parents the guidance. And so they have to be kind of high school level, but obviously clean up, because they're the ones telling the story. And then for the parents, that level of readership is high too.
Yeah.
So tons of studies done on that. So the tween, 8 to 12, level intellect is what you want to do in those cartoonings.
I would actually love to get your card and touch base with you later.
I've been like 25 years about this thing, so I know.
And you'll notice Potter the Otter is a feature on our website. We're very excited about this, which we've also presented him here.
Okay, Chris wanted to go next. Chris, go ahead.
Thank you, Don, and thank you, Sonia. Good to see you again. You know, in my region, the communities we serve, I see a working model with community organizations and the complete count committee effort that's spearheaded by Monterey and touches into Santa Cruz and San Benito. But as it relates to, opportunities to nurture engagement from the employers to create more access opportunities for hard-to-count individuals in the farm setting, and it may not just be filled, but I'm thinking, and we've talked about this at length, it could be housing sites, particularly for H-2A workers, and there's been concerns and questions about, do they count? Yes, they do, but increasing the education there, and it's region-specific. And there are also opportunities to engage employees at those types of settings where you have employer understanding and employer buy-in. In addition to that, we've had conversations in our region with respect to utilizing the fixed site settings. It might be a packing house in some area. In our region, it's the processor sector. However, I think where maybe some strategic, targeted, and focused engagement, perhaps from your office with a group like ours and a few others, maybe working through some of the, I would just say lack of familiarity between industry and some of those who are doing the work from the community-supported organization perspective, but where the relationship does not exist. So where you get down to the point of actually granting access to certain community organizations, even though they may be there using state resources or federal resources to perform outreach, I've encountered a climate of some resistance to allowing that dialogue to take place at a work site setting because of maybe a lack of relationship or perspective of misunderstanding over what other reasons or what other agendas may exist in addition to, for which there should be none, but these are things we need to work through. And so as we've been engaged, I've been personally engaged with a few organizations and the counties for months now, I think there's an opportunity, could be region specific, but in our region to perhaps engage more directly so we can cut through some of the misnomer and perhaps create some assignments with which organizations and or what is going to be the overseeing institutions that's going to guide how outreach is to be conducted, so that at the end of the day, I think we see an employer side that has fixed site opportunities to create this access to the hard-to-count population, a lot more open, ready, and willing to engage so that the hard-to-count population, we increase the likelihood that they can actually be counted in agricultural areas.
Thank you, Chris.
I'm curious, are you going to provide guidance to households that receive this about how to handle their college students so that they don't get counted twice? I guess we could count them twice.
Unfortunately, they've thought of that through quality assurance on the back end post-census. But yes, our messaging will contemplate sort of a variety of different individuals that may find themselves in unique circumstances, particularly university housing is one. The other, are those in other types of institutions, nursing homes as an example, what we call group quarters. So we're working in two different ways. We've had an opportunity to connect and formalize a partnership with specifically the California community colleges, and know that both our chancellor and president of the UC and CSU systems have also stepped up, and so we're working closely with UCOP and the president's team to help also find ways to distribute that directly to students as well. So public messaging as well as student-focused messaging.
Well, I am personally just so nervous about this. I think California has so much at stake. We could lose a congressional seat, let alone all of the funding that's at stake, and we have a hard enough time getting federal funding as California. So, and we have, I think, a very big fear factor that the seed was planted when the presidential administration tried to insert a citizenship question. So even if it's not in there, I think there's a lot of concern about that. So my basic question is, in the face of all of this, how can we help? How can we help? What can, I mean, even just me, what can I do to help you, because I want to help people get to a place that they feel is safe and a place where they'll have connectivity to be able to fill out the form, and someone there who can help guide them through the process, and so they're not afraid to answer questions.
I think you can help in a couple different ways. I think just the sort of simple act of brainstorming with our team, much like Chris and Martha have already highlighted, sort of ways to make sure that as we're thinking through continuing to execute and implement our plan, what are the pluses and pluses we can add to that to make sure that we do the best job that we can. As we continue to work in communities, we'll be sure to include Josh on various updates that we have, and we are working on some communication channels for our state agency partners particularly. So as that information comes out, for example, part of our outreach strategy is for folks to host what we're calling questionnaire assistance centers, which would be where a community member can come to, for example, a library, a school campus, perhaps a health clinic, so on and so forth, sort of a variety of different settings, perhaps a fairgrounds, and where Wi-Fi would be available for that person to actually complete their census on a device that has some basic security sort of standards, but then they can do it away from their home, and so trying to overcome some of those elements of fear that we know especially are within our immigrant communities, and also to allow in-language access at those sites too. So we're working to understand what is the best way to share where those locations will be as well. To your point about fear, there's sort of a wide range of sort of thoughts around the public disclosure of those sites, but it is a resource that our partners are investing in, so we'll look forward to sharing that. And that is also sort of articulated through that SWORD tool that I mentioned, that if it were a good thing to share, happy to do that. Of course.
Hi, thank you so much. It's incredibly exciting, and I know I've worked a lot with the California Foundation associations that are very involved in organizing private dollars to supplement and support to many of your partners around the work that you're doing, so it's terrific. Question for you. You mentioned disinformation, and I'm wondering whether you all have a direct line of communication to some of the social media platforms. I'm concerned that at the 11th hour, you may find, the week of, that suddenly there are ads up that are, really sending people to the absolute wrong place, and whether you have kind of a hotline set up that you can, really engage them in kind of a cease and desist on that, because it, all the planning and all the work that you all are doing could really be, set back significantly by some last-minute activity that none of us really sees coming. And so I'm just wondering if you have some way to kind of message directly and quickly around that.
Absolutely. Given the sensitivity of the subject, I'll try to keep it high level. We are very fortunate to have the support of the governor's office, and what that means by way of resources and our partners over at Cal OES. So outside of their work, as we know it, responding to emergencies, they also will be working alongside us in identifying some of those really true areas of misinformation to help address it directly with platforms, and we do have a pretty robust relationship with them through our paid media side. In addition, really excited that all of our ethnic media partners have really stepped up in this space. I think it's something that's top of mind for a lot of different communities, and really being willing to work with us. So in addition to sort of the source and trying to contain and mitigate the source that may be in our sort of cyber world, also making sure that that's complemented with a communication strategy that will help reinforce, remind folks how to steer clear of fraud and some of those challenging situations I know are all at top of mind. Thank you.
As long as it's quick.
Thank you very much. Very good presentation. I can't put my arms around this, so you're going to have to help me. We're going to spend $200 million, which I understand. what is, I mean, how much money comes from the federal government to California? I mean, it's obviously not 200 million, it's probably trillions, but what is the magnitude of what we're talking about? Because congressional seat is one thing, but there's a gazillion dollars, I assume. So what is that magnitude?
The complexity of how federal funding drawdowns in relation to actual census counts, I would definitely leave to my friends at Department of Finance to give you a very, 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 very specific number.
Looking for a big picture number.
Yes, big picture is roughly $1,000. The safe number is a minimum of $1,000 per person per year that is not counted.
Wow. And then may I ask one other question? And that is, when you showed the state and where the problem areas are, some of those run right down the Central Valley.
The hardest to count.
So what are we doing to educate the leaders in those supervisors and mayors and councilmen to understand the importance? I mean, roads, I saw roads on there, but they're going to say, well, that's not important because the state pays for our roads and our roads are terrible. So what messages are we going to be able to deliver? And I guess it means some people need to go before supervisors and remind them, but do you have specific outreach there too? Maybe it's RCRC. Mary Ann was here, she's gone, but anyway, she didn't want to hear this part. But anyway, that's my question.
Yeah, I would say that insofar as our direct relationship from the state office perspective, we've had the closest working relationship thus far with our state legislature, and they have been phenomenal partners in sharing the word. Beyond that, we do have established relationships with CSAC, the League, and RCRC that we will be ramping up as we approach March. In addition, we have had engagement from our congressional delegation, and we'll sort of be more astutely and sort of formally communicating with them through the count to share messaging, to help with mis and disinformation, sort of a variety of things. But we are really fortunate that our trusted messengers and partners do come from the communities by which the many, many local elected officials live, work, and play in. So the work that our partners have done in this space, I think, has been incredible, particularly also convening local complete count committees. And then also would be remiss if I did not highlight, we do have contractual relationships specifically with our counties. So in addition to those ACBOs, our counties, and then many, many tribal governments. So kind of just to expand our universe of contracted partners. Of course.
Just to reiterate too, the contracts that we have with each of the counties really will reach the supervisors because they need to get the authorization for this work to happen.
Talking about those fancy resolutions?
And they do all have fancy resolutions. All the counties have developed their fancy resolutions. They actually, a lot of the counties did a launch in last April, and coming up, like, I know that, like, one of my counties in Region 1, in Northern California, Tehama County, they'll be doing a big launch next week. So the counties are the ones who know what their base, and so they'll be working with their supervisors and administrators and agencies.
Great. Thank you very much for the presentation.
Thank you, of course. If you
Enjoyed
need
having both
anything,
of you
let
here.
us know.
All right.
We're all going to do an Instagram with that.
So we're going to postpone the next item on our agenda because we have a hard, not important. No, we have a hard 12 o'clock Skype interview coming over, so we're going to go ahead and move on. Our presentation is on the ag workforce, and David Shahulian serves as a Democratic Chief Counsel to the House Judiciary Committee's Subcommittee on Immigration Policy and Enforcement. As Chief Counsel, he advises the Democratic Committee members and the larger Democratic caucus on general immigration policy issues, including the recently introduced Farm Workforce Modernization Act. So David, we see you there. Are we connected?
I see you. I mean, sorry. Oh, now I see you guys. Yes. We're good.
Oh, okay. Welcome.
Hi.
I just did a little introduction for you, so you're welcome.
I heard that.
Okay, you're welcome to go ahead and, if you'd like.
Well, I mean, I'm here to answer your questions. You know, I don't really have a presentation. We moved the bill. You know, something that we have been wanting to do for a long time. Ms. Lofgren had really been wanting to champion. You know, this is kind of ag jobs is a bill that for a long time, you know, had been around, and there were different champions for. But you know, last of which was Luis Gutierrez. But when he departed the House, we kind of inherited it, and then we began the Congress working on a bipartisan basis with a number of members on a kind of comprehensive bill for the agricultural sector, a bill that both provided a legal pathway for current farm workers, reformed the H-2A program to simplify it for employers while still protecting workers for the future, and then doing a e-verify system for the agricultural sector to kind of get the whole system enforced as well. So that was the kind of idea. You know, we negotiated the bill with growers from all sides, including various groups from California and the United Farm Workers. We were able to, you know, reach a deal at the end of September, got a bill out October, November, and then finally got it out of the House in December. So we kind of moved very, very quickly once we got a deal on that bill. We're very proud of the effort. You know, we're now trying to help move it along in the Senate. You know, it's you know, that the kind of landscape in the Senate is still a little bit fuzzy, particularly with some of the other things that are right now taking the attention of that body. So anyway, that's my presentation. If you guys, but I'm here to answer any questions you have.
Yeah, so I'll ask you one. How? I mean, you mentioned moving it through the Senate. How's that going to look? I mean, is there enough Republican support to get it out?
Well, I mean, there isn't yet, and I don't know. I mean, the bill was designed. You know, I don't work in the Senate, so my, you know, we knew for certain that nothing would pass the Senate if the House sent them nothing.
True.
So we had to send them something, and we had to send them something that we knew could pass the House. You know, a bill that passes the Senate will likely look different than a bill that is designed to pass the House, at least out of the gate. I think there is a bill that can pass both houses, but you know, there's a dance you have to kind of go through, and this is the way we start the dance. And you know, there are various Republicans in the Senate who want to champion the bill. They'll potentially move the bill to the right. The bill was designed to have space to move in a either more, you know, employer-friendly or even you could argue in a Republican-friendly direction. Those are not necessarily the same thing, and in fact, in some ways, may not be the same thing. Where you might see, for example, some Republicans may just want to see trade-offs on green cards. You know, we're going to give green cards to ag workers; they've got to be taken away from someone else. You know, those are the kinds of trade-offs that we might see people, you know, present. But there are various Republicans. We have Tillis, Gardner from Colorado, Crapo, and Risch from Idaho, who have said good things about the bill and would like to see what kind of space there is to move the bill. Senator Graham has indicated some willingness to move a ag bill like this through the Senate. You know, but in the end, we're good. You know, I think they just got it. They're dealing with impeachment now. They've got some primaries coming up on the Republican side that they may want to get behind them. So I cannot tell you yet what that picture looks like in the Senate, and I'm probably not the foremost expert on that either.
The board here. Crystal, go ahead.
Just a you know, as long as we're asking you to see into the future and prognosticate, question for
about
you.
a body in which I do not work. I'm kidding.
Yeah.
I mean, we're going to really do the bill. I just want to say again, the bill was designed it had all the pieces that we knew would be like, oh, this is enticing to, you know, more conservative offices, right? It's about ag. Two, we designed the legalization program. I'm sorry, I know I cut you off, but I just want to say a couple things here. We designed the legalization program to be way more friendly to conservative, you know, members, right? There isn't necessarily a mandated path to a green card or citizenship, right? There is an absolutely voluntary one for anybody who wants it, but there's also people who want to just have a temporary status and go home are free to do so as well, and the bill provides all those various options. You know, we did a few other things, including E-Verify, that we knew would just be enough to say, all right, this is a bill that maybe isn't the way that a lot of Republican offices would have written it, but it has all the necessary pieces, and there are like levers that can be pulled and make it a little bit friendlier or more easy or more palatable to some offices. So, you know, we're just hoping to get into that discussion, and, you know, whether that's a way further, a much more conservative bill, either on an immigration basis or a much more employer-friendly bill that passes the Senate, and then we get into a conference and we work that out, or whether, you know, I mean, another idea was that, I'll just say one last thing. I'm sorry, I'll let you speak again, but, you know, the other thing we were thinking about is the Supreme Court might act in DACA, which might spur legislative action, and we wanted to make sure that this bill had already passed the House in case there was like a kind of mini immigration deal that might be able to take shape. And again, if this bill hadn't passed the House, then this wouldn't be considered at that point. So I'll say that. I'm sorry. You were asking me a question when I rudely interrupted you.
No, thank you. That's very helpful. Given the regular news that we're hearing about the dire concerns of the ag industry right now, you know, Borden Dairies just filed for bankruptcy yesterday.
That's huge.
Where does industry stand on this? And, you know, I'm just curious sort of how they're thinking about it and whether they may tilt the scales, particularly with this administration feeling some heat from industry. Sort of where do you think that fits into your calculus around desirability?
Well, I mean, that is part of the calculus, right? I mean, we, you know, in the House, you know, we of course had a lot of industry support. We had over 320 organizations on the employer side of things, associations and other business groups, and including the U.S. Chamber of Commerce as well, that supported the bill. We were very excited for that, and that, of course, has a lot to do with why the bill moved. But, you know, it was also like, this is a Democratic House, and United Farm Worker support really got it across the finish line. In the Senate, we know that that calculation is slightly different. You will need UFW support in order to get the Democrats on board, but, you know, it will be business. They will be the business community that will need to really get Republican senators to move. They are, so, you know, immigration is I've been dealing with immigration policy in DC now for 13 years, both in and outside of the legislative branch. I was also in the last administration, I was the Deputy General Counsel at DHS. You know, immigration is an area where some of the natural alliances kind of break down, right? You know, normally you think of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce and you think of farmers as being very pro-Republican and not as pro-Democrat. But on immigration, really a lot of these groups don't have anywhere to go except the Democrats, right? I mean, like, I remember when we were doing a giant immigration reform bills back in 2007 and again in 2013, where the U.S. Chamber of Commerce would go in and meet with Republican offices, and the Republican members would tell them to their face, including, you know, Tom Donahue and other really important people at the chamber, that on immigration, you're not our constituent. You know, a lot of Republican offices care more about what Numbers USA and FAIR and Center for Immigration Studies thinks than they do what the Chamber of Commerce or other business groups think. But hopefully that's different in ag. You know, a lot of Republican districts are rural. They have a lot, you know, the immigration, you know, like you can't just, there is no way of solving the agricultural labor issue without dealing squarely with not just future immigration, but currently undocumented farm workers. We have about 1 million of them doing the work, and there's no real plausible solution that just replaces all of them. And I think most people who really get it and know their districts and talk to their farmers know it. Let me just say this. One of our lead sponsors on the bill was Mike Simpson from Idaho. Idaho is a pretty conservative place, not a very pro-immigrant place. While we were negotiating this bill from the very beginning of the Congress, Mike Simpson was on TV and on radio and in town halls telling everybody he was working on this bill and that there would be kind of a path to, you know, status for undocumented farm workers. And he learned how to, and he was very much supported. They got a lot of, you know, there were some people who of course, you know, criticized him for it, but he got a lot of support in his district from his constituents and definitely from businesses. We had about 30 agricultural groups from Idaho that signed on to the bill. He knew how to, I mean, he understood how to talk about that issue and why it was important to very, you know, would normally be conservative, you know, individuals in his state. And you know what? When you deal with something on a pragmatic level, people get it. And this is an issue that needs to be dealt with pragmatically. So we are hopeful that because of the space that it's in, because of the realities, the accepted realities, this is not an area where I think is easy to demagogue, right? It's hard. You know, Stephen Miller may very well, and I'm going to be honest with you, I think Stephen Miller still believes that even in agriculture, these jobs should be done by Americans. They're just, most Americans and most people don't really think that's ever going to happen again. And it makes it a little easier to deal with this issue. So we hope because of that and because of the grower support that they will be able to get, you know, a growing number of Republican senators to back an effort. Now, what that effort, you know, ends up looking like still remains to be seen. But look, if they can't do it, this may be something that's dealt with later. We've at least done a lot of good work now. We are hopeful. I mean, you know, we have, you know, you will see in the next few days, like, if it hasn't already been published, what the wages will be for this year, the AWR rates, they will be going up. Under our bill, they wouldn't. That will be a reason to try to, you know, move our bill. But, you know, it's still unclear how much the growers will be able to overcome the kind of normal anti-immigrant bias that there is among some Republican offices. I mean, I don't mean to be political about it. I just think there's no other realistic way of talking about it.
Hi, David.
I hope that's not offensive. This is the way and you know what office I work for, so sorry, but go ahead.
No, and here I was, this is Secretary Ross. I was just going to compliment you on being so straightforward and pragmatic, so thank you. But mostly, I just wanted to say thank you for you and the staff, and especially to Representative Lofgren for the work on this. I know how intense it has been. I have worked on immigration and ag jobs since day one when I was in the private sector. And this is scary, more than 10 years ago. I started working on this 15 years before that. And when I became chief of staff at USDA, the first meeting that Secretary Vilsack sent me to was at the White House. And I came back and said, we're going to get immigration reform and ag jobs this year. And everybody looked at me and said, she just moved here. So to get a bill that had such broad support in the way that you did it has put us in a place that we have not been for almost 2 decades. And so I just wanted you and the Congresswoman to know how much I personally appreciate it, and I know how much California agriculture appreciates the good efforts. So thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you so much for that. Those are very kind words, and they mean a lot to me, so I appreciate that. And they will mean a lot to her. Thank you.
Bryce?
Thank you, David, and thank you for making time to give us this report. Well done on getting a bill through the House. We need this so badly. We came so close in the Obama administration, and we thought we had it. Are there any litmus tests that are going to be required? Will there be some sort of connection in funding for the wall? Will this get kind of somehow bogged down in that discussion, or can
Maybe.
it stay away from that? What do you think? And you know, I am no proponent of the wall, but we need this so badly that if you needed to throw bones that way, we need this in order to just have a framework to work from that works.
I agree with that. You know, look, we as I said, like we needed to get a bill out. Again, if we couldn't move a bill and we didn't do anything on this bill, nothing would happen. I can guarantee that. Now we at least keep this issue alive. We invite the Senate to do something, even if it's different, even if it's radically different. I actually don't care. You know, they could pass a bill, they could pass a resolution, and we can go into a conference on that. They could pass a bill that only does H-2A reform, or that only does E-Verify, and we can go into a conference for that. Like, it doesn't matter to us, right? They can, as long as it's a bill about ag, we can go into a conference committee between the two houses, invite the administration to participate, and see if we can cut a deal that goes, you know, because that's what really counts, right? It's once the administration gets involved, and we need McConnell to basically bless it. You know, a bill, the way that we pass it, is not likely going to pass the Senate real quick, or just the way it is, but they can pass something, and we invite them to pass it, even if, you know, even if we don't love it. It doesn't really matter, because we just need to get into a room and try to work out the differences and see what a final negotiation can look like. We hope that happens. Yes, the administration is going to, at some point, have a say. We luckily, and that this is a tribute to the Republicans that we worked with, they fought hard to make sure that this administration did not issue a veto threat, what we call a statement of administrative policy. And they did it, right? So far, the Trump administration has been silent about the bill. My guess is that, and so we heard that they were thinking of putting out a veto threat and just putting out a statement, ripping the bill apart. We know, look, there are people inside the White House that support, I'm not going to say the bill in its current form exactly, but they support the ideas behind the bill, and they wanted the bill to move and are hoping the Senate will come forward and do something. There are lots of people in the White House or in other departments that want something to move on this, as you can imagine. But there are, Stephen Miller, as you know, is not there yet and may never get there. And so the question is whether they can somehow sideline him, which I think is going to be almost impossible to do because of his, I think, stranglehold on this issue right now. But yeah, at some point there will be, you know, there will be a discussion about things that they might want to see paired, or things that are important to them, and we will have to figure out what, if anything, of those things can be paired with this. What I kind of alluded to earlier, and I think it's probably the more realistic option, is that I think at some point, if the Supreme Court acts on DACA and DACA is slated to end, there will be a renewed push to do something about that. And I think this can now become part of that conversation. And so you might see a deal. I think the most likely outcome is that there is a deal that deals with DACA and that deals with farm labor, and that then also looks at some of the issues dealing with the wall and the border. That's what, you know, if something were to happen, that's probably the most likely path. But that, unfortunately, that is something that doesn't come together until the Supreme Court acts, which may not be until like early summer.
Yeah, then you're in the election cycle too then.
Yeah, and immigration is never easy. It's particularly difficult in an election cycle.
Always throws a curve. No, I really appreciate.
And honestly, it becomes difficult for both sides. I mean, I'm going to be very honest. I am very honest. I'm candid, right? Like, there may be a lot of people on our side that's like, why don't we just wait till after the election because we may win and we can cut a better deal then. And that's the perennial problem around here as well, right? So we'll have to deal with that.
Yep.
If
Well,
that
David,
happens.
I really appreciate your insight into this. It's good to get your perspective and what things are going on behind closed doors up there. Yeah, you're more than welcome. We'd love to have you come out and do this in person. You know, we'll show you around California. Good food. Yeah.
I love it. I mean, I'm never going to say no to a trip to California.
Excellent.
Particularly right now, it's snowing outside.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. All right. Well, thanks again for participating with our board meeting today. Really appreciate the insight. So.
It was my pleasure. Thank you, and thank you for the kind words again. We're proud as Punch, not only in what we did, but how we did it. We really think this is it's the process that we really love. You know, like this is, work together and try to pragmatically solve important issues, even on complicated, politically complicated topics. And so we're hoping that this becomes the way we do things around here, at least to some degree. We'll keep trying to build on it. Thank you.
Thanks again.
Thank you.
Bye.
Yeah.